right, let's get going, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, good evening to all of you. Thank you once again for joining us in our August edition of the Visionary Leaders Readers to book club. I always confuse these two, Visionary Leaders and Visionary Readers book club. And maybe the reason why I'm also confusing these two, especially nowadays, is that there was a suggestion, perhaps we should look at converting our book club into a Toastmasters club. How exciting would that be? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, now I want to start with the book of the month, which is Who Moved My Cheese, and just give a simple background, let me put it that way, or introduction to open, the floor for the audience to start the reviews and also hear what everyone has to say about this very interesting book. So yes, the title says, Who Moved My Cheese? And the subtitle is that is an amazing way to deal with change in your work and in your life. It's basically a fable, if I can put it that way. And the interesting thing about this book, what I love about most books that are written in this way, is basically a story about change. It teaches you like using metaphors and analogies in terms of how you can basically stop and think for yourself, and using these analogies and metaphors, how you can apply what we have learned in the book in different aspects of your life, not only in your physical health, in your relationships or in your workplace, or in the way you interact with people in your work, at home, or wherever, basically. So if I can summarize it this way, basically the book is about 4 characters. Is the interesting thing about these characters is that they are 4 little creatures. 2 of them is little people and 2 of them is mice, and they have names. And what I found interesting is that with each and every of these 4 characters, we can always identify with them, with each and every one of them. If you have read the book, you will actually realize when it comes to change in general, most of us are afraid of change. And most often than not, this change is actually derailing us or deterring us from making progress into the path that was important things that we're supposed to pursue in life, such as our aspirations and dream. So to summarize, let me read something directly at the back of this book, because it's basically written for all ages. And as I said, it's about a story about 4 characters where we learn about valuable lessons about life. And they say it takes less than an hour to read, but its unique insights can last for a lifetime. Who Moved My Cheese is a simple parable that reveals profound truths. It is an amusing and enlightening story of 4 characters who live in a maze and look for cheese to nourish them and make them happy. So at the same time, it's also about health. As you know, if you want to be happy in life, your health must be in good condition. So as I said, cheese is a metaphor for what you want to have in life, whether it is a good job, a loving relationship, money, a position, health, or spiritual peace of mind. And the maze is where you look for what you want. Interesting one, whether the organization you work in, or the family, the type of family you want, or the type of relationship you want, or the kind of community or environment you want to live in. It's all about your ideal. If you are someone who's living with principles and values, you know that if you want to reach the pinnacle of your life, there are some things you must be aware of. There must be places you must avoid going to. There must be people that you must avoid interacting with, like those negative people who will always say, if you were telling them about your dreams, they'll say, man, who has done that before? That's impossible, forget about that. So you want to forget about those kinds of people. And yeah, this book, basically, I can summarize it that way, but I don't want to do all the talking myself. I just want to hear from you, first of all, when you first read, this is maybe the first question I want to ask, and then I'll take a few questions, and then as soon as I see there's no more question, I'll ask the second question. Or maybe for starters, let me start by saying, let's see hands in terms of what is the most important lesson that you have picked up from the book. Tonia's hand is up, and then we'll take Frida. Okay, while we do that, let's take Tonia. Tonia, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sibo. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, I think cool. I think the main lesson that I learned from this book is I think the book in general like teaches us to deal with an unexpected change and to almost like preempt it and plan for it. So basically to expect the change. I think there's actually I can just check in the book. There was a specific quote that really like stuck out for me, was that one of the characters, Haw, when he that's HAW, when he was coming to terms with like when he realized that he had ignored the change for a long time, he actually said that he didn't realize that the amount of cheese that had been there towards the end had been getting smaller, and what was left had grown old. It didn't taste good. He also mentioned that mold may even have begun to grow on it, although he didn't notice it. So he said he did want to admit, though, that if he wanted to, he would have seen what's coming. And so I guess that for me is one of the biggest lessons I learned from the book. He basically realized that the change wouldn't have taken him so much by surprise if he had basically been watching and preempting it. Like the little mice always had their little sneakers tied around their necks throughout even when they were enjoying their cheese and on their daily mission, because they basically prepared for a day that they're going to have to put those shoes on and run around the maze looking for new cheese. So I guess it basically shows us that those who are prepared to move with the change instead of blaming or feeling like the victim, and those who are proactive to find a solution and waste less time instead of staying in their comfort zones, are actually the ones who succeed. And so, yeah, the moral of the story is we can't control change. It is inevitable. We can just control how we view it and how we handle it. And I just want to end off with one other thing that I noted from the book. I just want to quickly, it was on page 65. It basically says old beliefs do not lead you to new cheese. So he basically knew that when you change what you believe, you change what you do. So you can believe a change will harm you and resist it, or you can believe that finding new cheese will help you and embrace the change. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Sibo. That's basically my take on the moral of the story. I think one would have to read the book prior just to understand what we mean by cheese and so forth. But I guess you did summarize it in your explanation, so I hope that made sense.
It does.
But yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tony, for your input. And I think from what you mentioned in the beginning, especially when it comes to HAW, HAW, is that, you know, you might not always be observant in terms of when change is starting to happen. But the lesson from me, especially with HAW, his lessons is that we must always be open to see those little signs when things are about to change. It doesn't always start like drastically, but always watch out for those signs. And then you must always be prepared to, whenever you see those changes about to happen, then be able to adapt accordingly. So it's also about adaptation. So without further ado, I'll allow Frida to take the stage. Over to you, Frida.
Thank you, Dr. Siboniseni, and a good evening, friends. For me, I think mine would be similar to Tonia's lesson. What stood out mostly for me is the fear of the unknown and being stuck in your comfort zone. So it really made so much sense to me, because sometimes I do let fear get in the way of my dreams or my goals. You always ask yourself, or I always ask myself, what if something goes wrong? But having read this book, I got to learn that I must just do it. What if something goes right? You know, it's not always gonna turn out in a negative way. And I think sometimes when you are in a comfortable position and everything is going well, you're always like, why must I move from this position? But change is the only constant thing in the world, and we need to embrace change no matter what. I think that's one thing that gets in the way of a lot of people. We see also in the story in the Bible where Moses took the children of Israel out of Egypt. They were so against change that a trip that was going to take them a few years took them 40 years. So also for me, that really made so much sense to me. And I also got to understand that, like Tonya said, if you don't prepare for change and you think, well, where I'm sitting or where I feel comfortable, that's where I will stay. it is wrong. We must always be prepared. Like, we must have our shoelaces around our necks to say, what is my next move? What is my next move? And I also looked at it from a lot of celebrities in our country. They complain a lot of soccer stars, they play the victim to say that because they don't want to move with the times and change, they always feel like, no, we made it back then, or I had lots of hits back then. Why can't you recognize me even now? But we do need to move with the times and allow change to happen. So yes, that's what I learned from the book. And oh yeah, all the 3 books that we read sort of click together or intertwine together. If you really want to see change or improvement in your life, you need to put in work, like we've seen in The Alchemist, like we've seen in the book that we read last month, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And this one, you really need to be actively involved, and you need to have like a plan for your life. So you cannot just relax and hope that things will go right and pray, but you need to take action. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Frida. Yes, action. I learned that from one of the philosophers. They say the only way we can learn is through action. I mean, taking action in doing something that you want to change. Like these characters, they had to move in the maze in order to find the cheese they were looking for. Those ones were actually successful. Before I can maybe ask the next question, because I don't see hands anymore, I just want to read a comment that was made on the chat quickly. Zuri says, hi everyone, I can't speak. The lesson I learned is that I have all the characters in me. I'm still digesting and trying to figure out how to free the ham in me. So the ham is basically the character that was kind of afraid of change, who was skeptic of moving from that, if you've read the book, from that cheese station C, which was where they found the cheese in the beginning. But over time, as time goes on, it got ran out. And then now they had to make a decision to move, to actually try and search for the new cheese. These are the little people now. But yet at the beginning, the mice, they did move on and eventually found a new cheese as soon as they decided to change the environment. So that is very significant in order, for you to get what you want out of life. I mean, if you see things are not working out, let's bring it now back into reality in terms of our experiences in your family. What can you change to improve the quality of life between yourself and with your family members, with your relationships, in your workplace? It's all about doing what you want to do or what to accomplish, who you want to accomplish. And if you don't change, it says here in the book, if you don't change, you become extinct. Now, last question. I want any one of you basically to share your experience in terms of what I'm about to say now from this statement that I also got from the book. It says, when you move beyond your fear, you feel free. Can you maybe share your experience in terms of what you have done recently, something that you were dreading for a very long time, but as soon as you did that thing, you're like, man, it was not as intense or hectic as I thought it was going to be. And eventually, look at me now. I feel free, I feel happy, and generally, excited. So I see Frida's hand is up. So over to you, Frida.
Thanks, Sibo. Not necessarily this year, but last year I took a bold step to finally go for therapy.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's, after 3 sessions, I asked myself, why didn't I do this sooner? Because it was like I got born again. It transformed my life for the better. And I was so scared to talk about my personal life, my issues, my traumas and stuff like that with a stranger. But yeah, it's the best decision I've ever made. And it has helped me to stop working for other people, stop giving myself to other people, but to actually focus on me and do the work on myself. And that is the best gift I could have given myself. No one will ever give me any gift more than that gift that I've given myself. So it was also fear that was stopping me from doing it, but I did it. And yeah, thanks.
That is a great testimony, Frida. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. The one thing I learned is that to grow from those challenges, but sometimes they don't go completely. You tend to actually find ways to cope with those challenges as you grow older. And as you said, I think for me, like I said, one of the best decisions I made was to go for therapy last month, and it has done tremendous change in my life. And I would encourage anyone who are still contemplating of going to therapy, please do so. It really does help. And I know there are different strategies to try and, cope with stress or anxiety or depression. But for me, I have found, I wish, like you, Frida, I wish I've done this way, way back in my life. But, because of the environment I was in, it's something that was not even a common topic of discussion. So yeah, this is very important. Let me just jump straight into the big moment for me, which is the review of my book. As I said, the book title is called Speech Checklist, 5 Key Components of an Impactful and Memorable. It's basically about public speaking, as you can guess. Probably 80% of the book is about public speaking, but I do share some leadership lessons in it. So I'd say 80 to 20%. I am a Toastmaster, so basically the book emanated from my experiences as a Toastmaster, which is basically a global organization that teaches its members about public speaking skills, communication in general, and also about leadership skills. So as the book is divided into 3 parts, the first part is basically a short autobiography. It's my life story. And the second part, it has got 2 of those 3 components of 5 components of an impactful speech. And then the last part has got 2 chapters, which also make that 5 components of an impactful and memorable speech. So I'll start with the first part, which is about my whole life. What I learned about, first of all, you will see later on in terms of the importance of maybe starting with your own story when you are doing anything about a public talk, or maybe you are doing an interview or something like that. Storytelling is very important. And it's not just, just telling your story, but you learn that it is a craft. I say in the book, it is an art. And that art alone is basically an acronym that stands for, the A in that acronym stands for adversity. We all undergone through some challenges in life. So those challenges or problems, they are called adversity. And then the R stands for resolution, meaning that you tend to find a way afterwards. As you go through those changes or difficulties, you will take some lessons in it, and then you will tend to come up with solutions that will make you move on with your life after overcoming those challenges. So those lessons are what are known as resolutions that you take to move on with your life. And then the last part is called the T in that ART, A-R-T, stands for take home message. So that's what basically must happen in terms of whether you are telling a story, whether through writing or in a public talk. Always make sure that you start, or even if you don't have to start with the story, but there's some kind of storytelling within it. And using that formula, it will actually make your stories even more entertaining or interesting to read. So always remember, storytelling is an art if you are a public speaker, and also maybe even as a writer. So basically, they say the essence of public speaking is to tell a story and make a point. And as human beings, we're hardwired for stories. And if you start telling stories, actually people start to listen. And great storytellers, I'm telling you, they are always admired for their skills in terms of storytelling, because they have learned this art and science of storytelling. So in my book now, I try to use what I learned about this art to tell my own story, basically from where I was born, which is Stellenbosch, to where I grew up in the rural outskirts of the Eastern Cape, in a village near Queenstown called Dabetemba. And then I share my life journey, my high school, lower primary, and then higher primary, on my university days, and then all my journey that I went through up until to this point where I am in my life. And basically, the main reason is that, as I said, the essence of public speaking is to tell a story and make a point. Back to the title of the book is that I grew up having a lot of insecurities, or I could say imposter syndrome as well. I have a lot of fears, and my dominant fear was the fear of public speaking. I grew up reserved, well, generally a shy person, and I even considered myself as an introvert. But recognize this. What I'm trying to teach in the book is this. There are causes for any other fear that you might be suffering from. For me, specifically with public speaking, after I learned that it's actually affecting more than 80% of the world population, and then I realized that it's actually a serious problem, not only with me. There are many people after interacting with other people, I found that this is a common problem. So after reading through books, I learned that actually there is no one, especially in the African context, who is addressing this problem. So I had to do something about it. And for me, one of the best decisions I took was to join Toastmasters. I learned through a book that if you have a fear of public speaking, the best thing you can do for yourself is to join Toastmasters, because they will teach you not necessarily to overcome the fear of public speaking, but to manage it better. So that's what I did. And then other things you must also, one important thing you must also do, always open yourself to public speaking opportunities. So public speaking is basically a skill that you must learn by doing. It's just like swimming. If you want to be one of the best swimmers in the world, you cannot learn how to swim by just reading books. Of course, the book might be a manual for you in terms of the tips and tricks of the things you need to do when you're swimming. But as long as you don't go to the swimming pool, or you go to the river, go to the ocean to actually do the actual swimming, you will never learn how to swim. It's the same thing with public speaking. And the best platform for me, in my experience, that can help you to do that, it's either Toastmasters, or you can be a teacher or a lecturer or even a preacher, because those are public speaking platforms that help you to practice your craft of public speaking. So always remember, start with your story, because the story is the heart of the DNA of public speaking. And then now maybe we can move to part two. Maybe one thing I forgot to elaborate on was in the matter of your fears, like what was the root cause of your fear? For my case, it came back to the traumatic experiences that I went through in life. And in the book, I went into details, even some of the things I did not even open up growing up, because I grew up quiet, of those traumatic experiences I went through. I didn't even open them up to my brothers or sisters, or even to my close friends, because some of them were just embarrassing, to a point whereby in my first week in high school, I attempted to commit suicide, but I didn't tell anyone about that. It was due to bullying. And later on, my first year at university, I attempted again to commit suicide for the second time in my life due to severe depression, because the pressure was too much. First of all, my studies changed in the new environment, university coming from high school. And obviously, there was also personal issues. For those of you who have read the book already will understand. But the purpose of this review is just to appetize you, and also to clarify why did I share those experiences. So I go into details about those experiences, and also what resolutions or what solutions I took to overcome those challenges. And life went on, and also I drew some lessons in those things. And then those lessons, perhaps you can relate to my story. And then, because we all have different journeys in life, you can learn what I shared in my own story, and perhaps you can apply it, because some people, they might actually going through those challenges right now. So mental health challenges are very common. They are still dominating nowadays. So that's why it is always important to share your story, and people will always listen to you when you are telling your story. So that's basically the first part of the book. Now let's move on to the second part, which basically has got two chapters. The first chapter is called Rhetoric. Rhetoric is basically, if I can define it, I say in the book, is an art and science of effective or persuasive communication. And in the heart of rhetoric is the art of storytelling. So it comes back again to the reason why I started with my own story. And storytelling in this sense, as I said, I keep emphasizing, because it's an art. You need to learn how to tell stories in writing, and also, in communication in person, verbally. And basically, rhetoric is divided into three pillars. The first pillar is called ethos. The second pillar is called pathos. And the third pillar is called logos. So ethos is basically about credibility. As a speaker, there's a reason why when you're about to take stage, you get introduced. There will be someone who's been introducing you. So they'll basically read your bio. For instance, if you are going to give a talk about, let's say, entrepreneurship, any other place, they will be looking for someone to come and interview maybe future or aspiring business people or entrepreneurs. They won't ask anyone who have no clue about the subject matter. So they'll look for someone who has got credentials. That's why the word credibility comes from, credentials. So they will look at your past experiences. Have you managed business before? Have you started and run successful business before? Then from your experiences, they will ask you to come and share your successes with them. So credibility comes in that part. So as part of persuasion, you must also, your introduction must shed some light in that regard. So that's what credibility is all about. It's about you and whether you're qualified and your qualification for that particular topic you are going to speak about. The second part is pathos. So pathos, again, is the art of storytelling. As I shared in the beginning, it's all about, having to learn the art, having to go through adversity, going through the transformation or the resolution of solutions, and then the lessons from it, the take-home message. Then lastly, it's all about the third pillar is called the logos. Those are actually Greek terms. So logos is basically means logic. So when you want to persuade people, you must appeal to logic through reasoning or data or statistics. You will notice sometimes, when those effective people are effective communicators, they tend to use statistics a lot to paint more vivid picture about the influence they want to make to their audience. So in the book, I go into details in terms of how to not just drop statistics off like most speakers do, but they identify a technique that will drive that statistics home. So don't drop stats off, but drive it home. So in the book, I share strategies on how you can do that. And that's basically the first chapter called rhetoric, which is the first component of an impactful and memorable speech. The second chapter is called the ABCs of public speaking. So the ABC is just an actually abbreviation. A stands for attitude, B for body language, and then C for congruence. So attitude basically is all about your facial expressions and your attitude. Is also related, to your body language. But with your attitude, if you smile, for instance, you are saying I'm approachable, and actually I'm confident. Whenever you're giving a talk, always be mindful of your attitude. Always show positive vibes. Show that you are curious, you are passionate about the subject, and that's why you are talking about it. You're actually even appointed to talk about that subject because it's something which is close to your heart. So if you speak about subject that is close to your heart, it becomes easier to smile. And also when you smile, your audience becomes, because smile is contagious. When you smile, they smile back. So always portray a positive attitude when you speak. So that's what the first part, which is A in ABCs of public speaking, stands for. Then B is body language. You might not recognize this. Most people, especially those that are afraid of public speaking, they do funny things whenever they are presented with an opportunity to come and speak in public. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Some people will be scratching their heads, and doing funny things. Some tucking making like movements that are actually disturbing. They are not focusing on the message they want to deliver, but their fear is actually making them want to finish the presentation as soon as possible. So in the book, I give some tips and tricks on how to be mindful of your body language so that you can persuade your audience and actually deliver your message for up to maximum impact. It's also about making your presentation very memorable, which is basically through influence. You can learn some tips and tricks all through your body language. One quick example, but we'll talk about that later on. I want to talk about humor. For instance, some people think that if you want, because I know there are those public speakers that seem to be natural when it comes to public speaking. Some are very funny. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if you want to make your audience laugh, you must tell jokes. Humor, it doesn't have to be infused in your speech, but you can always uncover it. And through my research of this book, I found that you uncover humor, not infuse humor. So it's through body language where you can actually make your presentation very fun, or even yourself as a speaker. People will be laughing at you And due to what you are trying to teach, always make sure that whatever line or punch that will find in your presentation is all related to the message you are trying to put across. And another tip for the reason why people use humor is that as soon as the audience laughs, then they are more eager to listen what you're about to say next. So it's another strategy to actually make your audience pay attention to what you're about to say. And yeah, so that's very important. And maybe a practical example, I always ask this question. For instance, have you ever wondered why memes are so funny? It's all about body language, if you think about it, because you'll just see one photo, maybe someone is doing funny thing, and then there will be just a phrase above the meme. It's not necessarily always about the phrase that is funny, but the body language that is portrayed in that meme. So that's why I'm saying body language, you can use body language to actually even uncover humor in your public talk. So that's another strategy. Then in terms of C stands for congruence in the ABCs of public speaking. So it's all about congruence, it's all about an agreement. That's a synonym for agreement. It basically means then that whatever you're saying with your mouth, it must be in agreement with your body language. So that's why that abbreviation is actually together and in the same chapter. So I go in the sub-chapter into details, even using my own speeches that I delivered at Toastmasters, even outside of Toastmasters, in trying to explain these concepts or principles I'm trying to teach in the book. So for instance, for each chapter, I'll share maybe 2 to 3 speeches, and sometimes blogs, articles from my blogs, because I started blogging to practice writing back in 2018. Some are just articles on public speaking, communication in general, and as I said earlier, some are on leadership. So I use all these I use examples, for instance, my speeches, to paint a more vivid picture of what I'm talking about, using examples from my own speeches or articles from my blog. So that's what the second chapter is all about, which is now part 2. So that sums up the second part of the book. Remember, first part, the first chapter on part 2 is rhetoric, and then the second one is the ABCs of public speaking. Now moving on to the last part. The last part, which is part 3, is the third part has got 3 chapters. So the third chapter is called Figures of Speech. So figures of speech are very important, especially when it comes to explaining difficult or very complex concepts. They kind of paint a more vivid picture and make whatever concept we are trying to teach more easier and clearer to understand. As we have noticed with the first book that we read, it's all about using metaphor. So the cheese is actually a metaphor for what you want in life, as we discussed earlier, this book. It basically, they use the metaphor to kind of accommodate any kind of change that you want to make into your life. So in this case, for public speaking, if you want to, let's say to describe yourself as a very resilient person, for my case, I describe myself as a wine. So in that sense, I call myself a wine, use the metaphor of a wine to say, based on the traumatic experiences I've went through in life, it's similarly with the process of making wine. You'll remember it starts being crushed as a grapes. It goes through the process of fermentation, alcohol and clarification up until it becomes like that beautiful and mature wine. So in that same concept, you can always think about different ways to describe yourself. For instance, some people talk about diamonds or pearls. Diamonds, they have to go through intense pressure and heat to eventually become those beautiful diamonds. They eventually become more valuable, or even gold. It's a process. For anything that is valuable, it must undergo some challenges, some struggles, and then eventually they become that valuable resource that it is, or that valuable in terms of human beings. All the successful people in life, you'll notice, I share different stories of successful people. One thing I noticed that almost all of them, they undergo challenges in their lives, but they took some steps to find solution in overcoming those adversities. And they give some take-home messages or lessons of what they learned in order to teach other people as well what to do when they are undergoing through challenges. For myself, For instance, I even decided this year to go through therapy just in June, as I shared earlier, because I realized other forms of therapy that I used before are not actually helping me to heal completely and become the happy, fulfilled, and successful person that I want to be. So it's all about learning lessons and also teaching lessons from your life journey. So yeah, as I said, the second part is about metaphors, figures of speech, metaphors, analogies, anaphoras, and mesodiaplosis. And I know maybe some of you might not be familiar with these concepts, but in the book, I go into detail to explain them, what they mean, how they are used in the context of public speaking, and so forth. And yeah, that was the third chapter. And then the fourth chapter, interesting enough, is called HAQA, HAQA. That is an acronym. H stands for humor, A for acronyms, and then Q for codes, and then A for abbreviations. As I said in the second chapter, which is about the ABCs of public speaking, you can always, even in your title of your speech, to use an abbreviation for your speech title, or you can use an acronym as, and maybe something you can use, maybe the first letter of maybe the first, anything that maybe, let's say you want to teach about your own values and principles in life, you can always come up with an acronym. For my case, I use health as my core value, for instance. So that health is basically an acronym. H stands for humility, E for excellence, and then A for altruism, which is selfless leadership, and then L for love, T for transformation, and then H for happiness. So I go into details in my blogs, which is also found a way into the book, where I explain how you can even use your values as maybe as a title of your speech, and teach people, if you want to encourage them to start formulating values and principles, or even ideals to live by in life, even to formulate a philosophy that they use to live their life. So that chapter is all about that. I go into detail, first of all, by explaining humor, how you uncover humor in your speech, and then how to use abbreviations, how to use codes, relevant codes, to drive your message home. And then lastly, as I said, about acronyms. So that's basically what that fourth chapter is all about. And then lastly, the fifth chapter emphasizes it's about rehearsals. It's all about practice, practice, practice. If you want to be a good public speaker, always make sure you practice. Write your own speeches and practice enough before you can go and do and deliver your presentation or public talk. I started that chapter with a quote that I formulated. It says, proper preparations prior to presentations produce professional performance. If you notice, in the context of performance, first of all, a presentation or a public talk is a performance. So if you want to be effective, then you must practice like a professional. So I call public speaking like a performance. Just like any other performance, if you want to be a good singer or a good athlete or whatever, there's always practice. They emphasize practice, work hard in terms of rehearsing, practicing. And then eventually when you practice, the goal is not to become perfect, but to make progress. The more you practice, the better you get, the more you make progress towards the level you want to achieve. If you want to reach the pinnacle in your career, maybe as a professional speaker, you must practice in each and every possible opportunity. Always find ways of exposing yourself out there. Practice what you learned in books by doing it, because we learn best, as I said, by actually doing the actual public speaking, like swimming, as I said. You can't just learn about swimming from reading books. You must go and swim in the water. You can't learn about public speaking from books alone. I give tips here, but for you to be a better public speaker, you must go out there and deliver your talks, open yourself to those opportunities. So in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, that's what the book is all about. I'll stop there, and now I'll open the floor for questions for clarity. Thank you so much. So I see Anna's hand is up. Anna, over to you, Sisi.
Thank you so much, Doctor, and greetings to everyone. I really want to applaud you for the great work of your book. I'm having your book and I'm about to finish it, but I must tell you that I'll still read it and read it again because it's so practical. Thank you so much for the practical examples that you have put in the book, but again, the lessons about public speaking. Now, my question is about being persuasive. I want to understand to what extent should I persuade? For an example, I had been talking to this person who is in authority. I've requested an assistance. You know what happens? It's like in a club like this one, I want to speak to the club members, but because you are a head, I need to via you and get your permission. So you always postpone, and I follow up until I even think, you know what, maybe you are not interested. That's the first scenario. Then the second scenario is about something else to do with the group as well. You are the leader. I'm coming to you. You are the same person asking for permission. You don't want. You are also postponing. So I want to check whether should I pursue, because I think if I can push some buttons, I can get it right. But it's not in my nature to go that route. So I want to ask you, do I have to persuade, or can I just leave it like that because it's not in my nature? Yeah.
Thank you, Anna, first of all, for that comment in the beginning. I appreciate your review. First of all, you kept on sharing in terms of what you are enjoying so far about the book. So I truly appreciate that. And to answer your question, I think, that's one of the things I noticed that is actually frustrating a lot of employees in the workplace, the hierarchy. Because you might have an urgent matter that you want it to be resolved right now, but because of the system, you must always go through the steps first in order to, like your message, might want the CEO to solve it, but because you have to go through the structures, it actually delays the process. And even when you want to communicate now and be persuasive in terms of what you want, in that context, I think that's where you need to be mostly persuasive. And in this context, I think sometimes you just have to find ways to break the rules if you really want to get what you want. And I think, in my own humble opinion, to be persuasive, it's always about getting what you want, not necessarily at the same time, but to get the results that you want. And to do that, sometimes it means then you must break the rules. And for you, when you break the rules, always make sure you do something with respect and also with considerations. I'm trying to say this is that, let's say, the only options you have is just to write directly to the CEO and actually do what and tell the person exactly what you want. So it's all about knowing exactly how to be persuasive in your writing, maybe in this case, because to speak in that situation, it would be impossible due to the hierarchy. So in terms of emails, that can work. And perhaps there, in terms of being mindful in terms of what to say in your persuasion in order to get what you want, always, be straight to the point, when it comes to writing. So there are some etiquettes, email etiquettes that you must always follow, but most people, because they just communicate for the sake of communicating, they don't know that the purpose of communication is to connect. So persuasion helps you to connect with the person that you want something from. So it's all about learning how to write an email. And it's all about always just go to the point, be brief about what you want, and just emphasize what it would mean to you in order to get what you want. So maybe because, in this context, it's not necessarily about sharing all the three components of rhetoric, like having to share your own story or tell, establish credibility, as well as, using statistics to persuade or to sell your point. It might not be enough to do all those things through writing. So just go straight to the point and, communicate your message and make sure you are being respectful and mindful in the process. So that's what I can think for now in that specific scenario you suggested. Okay, Frida, your hand is up. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, thanks. Well, also noting that the time is almost up.
Yeah.
Mine is not a question really because I haven't really read the whole book. I read the first chapter yesterday. But I just want to give a comment to say congratulations on writing a book. I know it's not an easy process. And also because the chapter that I read was about your upbringing and your personal life, it was quite emotional for me to read, because some of the things that I read are also some of the things that I went through personally. And, I'm so proud of you to see that you were able to overcome the challenges that you encountered and the traumas, and you made something out of them. Because there's a quote that I like from Oprah where she says, "Turn your wounds into wisdom." And I think that is something that we must all do, to say, whatever that you went through, you didn't go through it because it was meant to destroy you, but somehow it was meant to build you and make you stronger. Because I do not believe that a soft life or a good life will make someone be strong or turn you into a magnificent person. So yeah, just go out there and spread your wings. And I think, like Dr. McLean said yesterday, that he sees you as a president, and that is so true. So yeah, don't let anything stop you, and just go out there and and do your best. So yeah, thanks for the book. I think, yeah, everyone should get it. Those who didn't get it, it will help you whenever you want to do a speech or a presentation, because somewhere, somehow, believe me, you'll have to stand in front of people and talk. And yeah, thanks, Sibo, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Frida. I took that comment to heart. It means a lot to me. And I receive all the blessings that I was blessed with yesterday in the main book launch. I was so humbled, really, by the comments, even like comments like yours. I'm so grateful, guys. Thank you for your support, and to everyone who has purchased the book and the reviews you keep on sending me privately. They mean a lot, and I'm encouraged to keep on doing what I love, which is writing. I promise you there are more books that are going to come. I have a lot of ideas because I'm a reader. We are visionary readers, book club after all, and that's what we aim to do, to inspire even more aspiring authors to take their work seriously. And if you don't share our own stories, then they won't relate. Like you said, Frida, you relate to my story because we almost all undergo some challenges in life, but it's all about turning those wounds into wisdom, as Oprah Winfrey said. I see my brother Sia, his hand is up. Over to you, my brother. We have 2 minutes, so make it quick. Thanks.
Thank you, Sibo. I have few people who joined us, and I'm sure they'll be interested to order the book. Can you tell us how
yes.
to get the copy?
Okay, cool. So thank you, my brother, with that question. So the book, for now, you can order online. I have a website for the book. It's called www.stanger23, STEINGER23 at stanger23.com, or else you can contact me directly for now, and then I will be able to give you the banking details if you are not you don't like the technology part of things. Question. And everyone, we have few seconds now before we are kicked out of the meeting. I think we have come to the end of the meeting. Thanks to all of you for joining and for listening for the reviews. If you want to get a copy, you can get hold of me, and then I will share the link with you and maybe the banking details. Thank you so much. I will close the session now before we are kicked out. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. Have a lovely evening and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
There was an interesting question, though. I wish you had time to answer. I was interested in it as well.
Okay, let's go and see if I'll be able to. What's the question?
What would you say to your younger self? I think something like that. Let me
Dream
check.
big. That's my short answer.